Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary if you're new here. I do post 2 new videos every single week, and today's video is going to be my May wrap-up. In the month of May, I did read 10 books. My average star rating was 3.5 stars. I read books by 3 male authors and 7 female authors, and I read books in a wide variety of genres, from literary fiction all the way to young adult fantasy. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into the 10 books that I read in the month of May. I did do a mid-month wrap-up this month, so I will have that linked in the card and down below if you want a more in-depth review of any of the first 5 books that I'm going to mention. I also did a full review of Catch-22 and the Hulu miniseries that is based on it, and I'll have that linked in the card and down below as well. The first book that I read in May was Catch-22. I did finish this. This was a carryover from April. Catch-22 is a classic satirical war novel by Joseph Heller written in the 60s, set in Italy during World War II. It follows our main character, Yossarian, who is trying to get sent home from the war, but everything he does just makes his mission count go up. The next book that I read was All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban. This is a young adult thriller horror type book. It follows 6 high school seniors at what they believe is a scholarship dinner, but it quickly turns out that that is not the case. They get locked into a room in the basement of a local restaurant that is closed, and they find out that they have to choose one person to kill with a syringe full of poison, or else they all die with a bomb that will explode in about an hour. The third book that I read in May was Midnight at the Electric by Jodi Lynn Anderson. This is another young adult. This is more of a sci-fi / historical fiction, I guess. It follows 3 main characters in 3 different time zones whose stories all connect. The fourth book that I read this month was The Job of the Wasp by Colin Winnett. This is a short young adult horror, very similar to Lord of the Flies in the type of idea. And the 5th book that I read this month was She Would Be King by Wayatu Moore. This is a historical fiction fantasy novel with a little bit of magical realism in it. It's about the formation of the nation of Liberia, which, if you don't know, is a nation in Africa that was created from freed slaves from the United States in the Caribbean. The 6th book that I read this month was Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. This book scored an overall 8.9 out of 10 on CAWPILE, which is a high 4-star. I ended up giving it 5 stars because I did enjoy it that much. I haven't gone back and adjusted the CAWPILE system. If you don't know what CAWPILE is, I'll have a link down below to G from Book Roast's video about it. I think she came up with the idea. That's who I heard it from. Future Home of the Living God is a sci-fi dystopian novel set in the near future in the United States. I believe it's set in Minnesota. And it's about a 26-year-old woman who is Native American, and she was adopted by a white family, and she is pregnant. And in this story, what's happening in the world is that pregnant women are giving birth to early hominins and not humans. So pregnant women are being kidnapped and having tests done on them. A lot of women aren't surviving birth. And our main character is trying to, I can't remember her name, so I'm sorry about that. But she is trying to not get kidnapped, basically, and they're trying to get her through to Canada, where she'll be safe, because I think this is only happening in the United States, is what it seems like. I really liked this book. It reminded me a lot of the flashback scenes in A Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which talk about how when the earth was changing, women were being affected by it. The drawbacks for this book for me was that everything went to shit in like 36 hours. Like, it went from everything was fine, people were doing their normal thing, to just complete shutdown. It almost reminded me of what was happening with a certain pandemic in real people's lives. Except for, obviously, in this book, people were being kidnapped and taken to special hospitals to be worked on. I thought the atmosphere and the writing style were really good in this book. I think what let it down the most for me, I read an interview with the author where she said that she originally started writing this book about 4 or 5 years before it came out, and then she didn't return to it until about the year it came out or the year before, and she ended up cutting about 200 pages of it. I feel like this book could have really benefited from some more fleshing out of some ideas, and probably those 200 pages could have helped. Overall, I did really enjoy this book. I would really recommend this book, and I do want to read other things by Louise Erdrich. The 7th book that I read in May was actually an audiobook. I listened to The Hazelwood on audiobook. It is by Melissa Albert. This is a young adult fantasy story about a girl who is, I think she's like 17 or 18. She's been raised by a single mom, and they've been sort of nomadic her whole life, going from place to place, and everywhere they go, she says that bad luck has been following them. Her grandmother lives in a secretive estate in New York State called the Hazelwood, and her grandmother is famous for writing a book of dark fairy tales called Tales from the Hinterland. Turns out the Hinterland is a real place in like an alternate universe, and creatures from the Hinterland are what are trying to lure the girl and her mother back into the Hinterland. The catalyst of the story in this book is that the mother gets kidnapped by the creatures from the Hinterland, so her daughter has to go. And again, I wish I could remember these people's name. I remember their last name is Proserpine, and the mom's name is Vanilla. Oh, the daughter's name is Alice. But Alice's mother, Vanilla, gets kidnapped by the creatures from the Hinterland, and Alice knows she has to go and find them, so she enlists a friend from school that she knew named Finch to help her. Finch is obsessed with her grandmother's book. He read it. You can't really get a hold of it anymore. That's a big problem with the stories. Alice wants to read this book to figure out what she's up against. All she has to go off of are Finch's descriptions of the stories that he wrote down because his book was actually stolen. I wound up giving this book an 8.3 out of 10 on Cawpile, which is a 4-star. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read the sequel to this book. The 8th book that I read was Brother in Ice by Alicia Koff. She is based in Barcelona. This book was originally written in Spanish and Catalan and then translated into English. This was an English PEN winner. I didn't like this book at all. So it's supposed to be, the blurb that I read said that it was part research notes, part travelogue from polar explorers, and then part like narrative of this 30-something artist in Barcelona's life. It's supposed to have some sort of dealing with having a brother with autism and what that's been like for her. The autistic representation in here, I'm not autistic. I'm not very close with anyone who is on the spectrum, but I have heard criticism of the representation of autistic people in this book, as well as her brother wasn't really in it. She mentions him a couple of times, but he's not really a character. The characters in this book were given letters instead of names. In this, it didn't really make sense for me, and it just made it harder to follow because there were multiple people she called different letters, if that makes sense. I don't know. I had a really hard time following this. I didn't really get into it. I liked the pictures. I liked the polar exploration like theme. But also I didn't care about the narrator at all. I didn't care about her life. I didn't care about her relationship problems or the fact that she couldn't get a job as an artist. I just didn't care. So this ended up getting a 2.3 on Cawpile, which is 2 stars. I thought it would for sure be a 1-star, but I didn't love this one. But I did really, the 9th book that I read in the month of May is The Witch Elm by Tana French. This is another book I didn't love. I had really high hopes for this book. It's a mystery novel set in Ireland about a guy who basically it opens up with how he's always been so lucky and he's very privileged. He went to a really nice private school, then he ended up going to a really nice private university, and he's been working as a PR guy, and he pulled this PR stunt, like should have gotten fired, but because he's so lucky, he didn't get fired from his job. And then someone breaks into his home and basically beats the crap out of him, and he can't really remember a whole lot of his life, I guess. He has like a brain injury, and he has some physical impairments, so he and his girlfriend go to live with his uncle who is dying in this house that when he was growing up, him and his cousins would go stay at every summer. And in the backyard, there's a witch elm, and at some point in the story, a child of his, not his niece, because it's not his sister's kid, but it's his female cousin's child, so I guess his other cousin, I don't really know. Her kids find in the backyard, inside of a hole in this tree, a human skull. That doesn't happen until like halfway through the book, but all of that is the dust jacket description, basically. So I was expecting that to sort of happen closer to the beginning, but it really didn't. And you find out whose body it is, and you sort of find out what happens. And I feel like you know what happens, and then there's 130 pages left of the book. That's just family drama. So for me, this book was less like intense mystery and more just like dramatic family stuff. I just wasn't into it. I ended up giving this a 5 on the Cawpile scale, which is 3-star. I liked the setting a lot. I liked the parts of them living in the house. I liked Uncle Hugo, but that was the only character that I cared about, frankly. Characters really let this book down. The plot let this book down. I was really intrigued for about the first almost half, and then I was like, oh. The 10th and final book that I read in the month of May was 11/22/63. This is another book that I listened to as an audiobook. It is a 30-hour-long audiobook, which I didn't realize before downloading it. I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 7.3 on Cawpile, and that's a 4-star. It's a Stephen King book. If you don't know, it's about the assassination of JFK. Sort of. It's about a guy in 2011 who is an English teacher in Maine, of course, because where else would a Stephen King book be set? I honestly was excited that it was a Stephen King book set not in Maine, and then it was set in Maine, and he makes a trip to Derry. But basically, he finds out that there's a wormhole in a local restaurant that's run by someone who, I guess, they're not even really friends, but the guy, for whatever reason, really trusts him. Al owns the restaurant. Jake is the main character, and Al, for some reason, decides that he really trusts Jake and wants Jake to finish this mission that he can no longer do. He wants Jake to carry out this mission to stop the assassination of JFK, because he's convinced that if JFK didn't get assassinated, basically the world would be the most amazing place ever, and Vietnam would never have happened, and all these great things would never have happened. So Jake does go back, and the wormhole always left out in the summer of 1958, and JFK gets assassinated in November of 1963. So he has to live there for like 5 years and not know if what he's doing is helping or hurting anything. For me, I really liked this book at the beginning, and then I liked how it wrapped up. I thought it was very interesting. It lagged for about probably 6 to 8 hours of the audiobook. So I don't know how many pages that was, but just in the middle. So Jake starts off by going up to Derry because the janitor at his school took his GED class and was like the best GED student he's ever had. And the guy writes this essay about how his dad brutally murdered his mother and his siblings in front of him and almost killed him, but he's the only one who didn't die, and now he has a limp and a brain injury, so he's got a really low IQ, and that's sort of why. And Jake's like, I'm gonna make this guy's life better. So he goes to like fix that before going down to Dallas. And then he gets to Dallas, and listen, if you don't know, I'm from Dallas. I don't live there now, but I was like born and raised in Dallas. A lot of the places that he talks about in the book, like he's always shitting on Greenville Avenue, and I'm like, well, it's my home street, so perfect. I don't know what Dallas was like in the 60s. I'm sure it was a cesspool of racists and sex crimes, just like Stephen King described. All the name dropping of locations that are like bad parts of town just put a bad taste in my mouth, I guess. So it was kind of annoying to read that. Jake ends up going to this town, Jody, in Texas, and becoming a teacher there, and he loves all the small town characters, and the characterization was really nice in this book. I really enjoyed the characters. And then Jake drives up occasionally to Dallas and Fort Worth to check out Lee Harvey Oswald and like to case him, and basically I thought it was too long. I guess it wouldn't have been as impactful if Jake had just shown up in November of 1963, stopped the assassination, and that had been it. Given what happens at the end of the book, I'm not going to spoil anything. What you find out about the wormhole and like the way that time works, I feel like that was just added in the last hour and a half of the audiobook, which is probably like the last 100 pages, and that could have been a larger part of the book. Most annoying things to me about this book: I don't like listening to Stephen King talk about sex. I didn't want to hear about Jake Epping's love life. I didn't care. I get that he falls in love with this like librarian or something. I get it, but like that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for like time travel, badassery, stopping assassinations, a little bit of historical fiction, whatever. Like, also, Jake didn't do any research before going to the 60s. And he keeps talking about how like, oh, I wasn't a history major, so I don't really know what happens. And he does shit like he hums and sings songs out loud that haven't been written yet. He just does a bunch of stupid shit that I'm like, why would you do that? And he goes to Florida for part of it to just like hang out for no apparent reason except for to bring a villain in later. It just didn't make sense to me, that part of it. I just felt like the book was longer than it needed to be. That being said, I gave it 4 stars. I think I did say that. I rated it 7.3. I'm fascinated by Stephen King's mind. There was an answer for everything. He lays it out for you and wraps it all up. He knows how to do that. I really liked it. I loved the beginning of it. It lagged for me in the middle. Then I loved the ending of it. I thought it ended really well. Those are the 10 books that I read in May. I was excited about the amount that I was able to read this month, and I'm really excited about the books that I'm reading in June. If you have not seen my June TBR, it is up. I will have it linked in the card down below. If you've read any of these books, please let me know if you liked them. If you have any recommendations that you think I would like or that I should read next, put them down in the comments. I would love to know. That is it for me today, guys. Please don't forget to give this video a like if you liked it, and go ahead and subscribe if you have not done so already and you would like to see more videos from me. I post mostly bookish and beauty content 2 days every week on Sundays and Thursdays. I'll see you on Thursday. Bye!